Well, the Conservative MP David Jones was a Brexit minister from 2016 until 2017. He supports Britain leaving the EU, and this is what he thought of the Foreign Secretary's comments.
I thought that they were rather strange because, of course, what we're doing is simply negotiating the terms of our withdrawal from the European Union. The procedure is set out very clearly in Article 50. Really, it's a question of whether or not both sides are willing to agree a deal. We made it clear. The Prime Minister made it clear as long ago as last year at Lancaster House that we wanted to enter into a free trade agreement with the European Union. That's been a position that's been unchanged for some considerable time. So to talk at this stage of possibly leaving without a deal, I think it seems to be a very strange remark, given that, of course, it's always been the case that if we can't come to terms with the EU, then we simply leave without a deal.
Well, he also said leaving without a deal would be a mistake we'd regret for generations. Bearing in mind what you've just said, why do you think he said it in the first place, if it's a strange thing to say?
Because it's not a mistake that the UK would be making. It would be a failure simply to achieve agreement. And in order to achieve agreement, both sides have got to be prepared to enter into an agreement. So really, it's not just a question for the UK, it's a question for both sides. But one thing is absolutely clear, and that is that leaving without a deal is certainly preferable to leaving with a bad deal. And that's always been the Prime Minister's position, and I would have thought that should remain Mr Hunt's position.
Do you buy the Foreign Secretary's remarks today, in which he seeks to clarify what he originally said? And he said, well, no, I wasn't saying it would be a mistake for Britain, which is certainly the implication of the way he phrased it in the first case. He said it would be a mistake for the European Union. Do you buy this clarification?
Well, I think that what he said certainly makes the position a lot clearer. The impression that
do you believe that is his position, or that he was just feeling the heat?
I think a certain amount of heat had clearly been felt, but nevertheless, I think that's a much more sensible position to adopt.
We may well get a bit more clarification on this next week. We know that the government's preparing to publish a number of technical documents on the consequences of leaving the EU without an agreement. We've got BuzzFeed News saying today that it believes there are going to be 84 different areas of British life, from fertilisers to workplace rights, which will be covered. You were in the department. What kind of work will have been done on this?
A great deal of work has been done, and I think that what we need to do is to see these technical notices presented in neutral terms, so that both business and the wider country can understand what the consequences would be.
I'm intrigued by that phrase, neutral terms.
Documents such as this have not always been presented entirely neutrally. I'm sure you will remember the.
You think the government might try to massage its own publications?
Well, I'm sure that you'll remember the work that the Treasury did prior to the referendum, which carried fairly lurid warnings as to what the consequences of a leave vote would be.
Your old department says that these will be factual,
which is good news, and I think that is the way that it should be presented.
So I
actually think that it's a great shame, in fact, that these documents have not been published sooner. We're publishing these only some 6 months before the date of our proposed departure from the European Union, and I think that it would have been good if these had been published before, because people do need assurance that leaving the European Union without a negotiated agreement is not necessarily going to be the end of the world. In fact, far from it.